are you all? Hope you all are fine, and I am very happy you are responding all my videos with very enthusiasm and your happiness already I have seen in my previous videos, comments, liking, share. So please viewers, like, share and comment this video, and you will also get information from all of the upcoming exams regarding your PG English and NET exam also. I discuss all the questions regarding NET, GATE and your PG English. So viewers, already I have covered Unit 2, that is the American Literature MEG 6 of IGNOU, the post consolidation in American literature. So already Unit 2 I have covered. So Unit 3 we will go the other side of American romanticism. So here it is the main important chapter regarding your exam point of view. So we will cover. So let's start. Okay. So other side of the American romanticism. So here it is the structure. Every unit has its own objective. So we will go what is the structure. Here is the objectives. Introduction. The scenes of American mission in the mid 19th century America. The Indian response to the American mission. The working class white response to the American mission. The black response to the American mission. Let us sum of questions and suggested readings. So already from this unit we have a clear-cut idea. The scenes of American mission in mid 19th century America. Here it is the topic is about mid 19th century of America, and here is the black response to American mission and white response to American mission. So question may arise, differentiate between white response to American mission and black response to the American mission. Okay. So Indian response is also there, Indian response to the American mission. So one by one we will cover. Okay, here it is the objectives. So we will go. The aim of this unit, as its title suggests, will be to look at the underside of cultural production, prolific as it was, of the era of American romanticism. Okay. So the aim of this unit, as its title suggests, will be to look at the underside of cultural production, prolific as it was. Okay, here is the cultural production, prolific. You know the word meaning. What is prolific? Prolific means it is abundant. Okay, so cultural production, prolific as it was, of the era of American romanticism. It is the era of American romanticism. Okay, the so-called romantic movement in America, which extended through the middle decades of the 19th century, witnessed a tremendous efflorescence of creative energies in literature and the arts. So some friends or some viewers have suggested me, ma'am, please translate in Hindi so we can understand word by word. Actually, I prefer to teach in direct method. Okay, so direct method you try to understand, it will beneficial for you for your upcoming exams, because translation method is not good. Okay, which I prefer. So that's why I tell all my students to write down the answers in simple English. What you know, what you understand about the test, just write down that much in your answer. So you will get good mark in your IGNOU exam. It's a tips also I am giving. Okay, so we will go. The so-called romantic movement in America. So what do you mean by romantic movement? Okay, so romantic, here it is a romantic movement in America. The romantic, you know, there is some attraction between men and women. That is the romantic movement in America, which extended through the middle decades of the 19th century. witnessed a tremendous efflorescence of creative energies in literature and the arts. In the creative energies in the literature and the arts. Okay, so the arts and literature in mid 19th century was so creative in America. The Renaissance in cultural realm synchronized with a resurgence in the material arena, with America gradually coming into its own as a modern industrial nation state. You already know in the Renaissance period, that is heavy industrialization was occurred. So the America gradually coming into its own as a modern industrial nation state. Many factories, many industries was set up in mid 19th century of America. The boom in industrial manufacture was an offshoot of the rise in agricultural productivity, and together this became factors in the enhancement of the per capita income and the general improvement of living standards. Okay, so what happened in a country if any industrial manufacture or any industry setup occurs? So the boom in industrial manufacture was an offshoot of the rise in agricultural productivity, and together this became factors in the enhancement of the per capita income and the general improvement of living standards. So what happened? The per capita income was also increased. Every man and woman were engaged in factory works, laborers and contractors and vendors also there in the factory works. So the per capita income क्या होता है? So per capita income आपका एक व्यक्ति का income. Okay, so and the general improvement of living standards, so general improvement of living standards was also increased. Okay, the vast interior of what is now the entire territory of the United States of America was invaded by hundreds of thousands of settlers moving westward from the east coast, taking of cotton, corn and wetlands. Okay, so the vast interior of what is now the entire territory of the United States of America was invaded by hundreds of thousands of settlers moving westward. Okay, those settlers moving westward from the east coast, taking of cotton, corn and wheatlands. Okay, now towns took shape. Old towns expanded into cities, and cities formed the nuclei of new states which sprang upon all sides in the wilderness. Okay, so now new towns took shape, old towns expanded into cities, and cities formed the nuclei of new states which sprang upon all sides in the wilderness, a new one entering the Union about every 2.5 years. Enterprising persons saw undreamed of wealth before them. So what happened? New towns took shape, old towns expanded into cities, and cities formed the nuclei of new states which sprang upon all sides of the wilderness, a new one entering in the Union about every 2.5 years. Enterprising persons saw undreamed of wealth before them. So there was a good thing happened in society. All men and women were abundant in money or undreamed of wealth before them. Needless to say, these enterprising persons were all white males of an affluent background. So here it is the main key point. Needless to say, these enterprising persons were all white males of an affluent background. Okay, these are all white males, okay, of an affluent background. So white males, here it is the main key point, you can note down. The benefits of progress were for them and them only, while women, Indians, ordinary whites and blacks were either passive spectators or actively incurred the expenses of this progress. So only white males were benefited from these towns or industrialization or renaissance in mid 19th century of American society. The benefits of progress were for them and them only, while women, Indians, ordinary whites and blacks were either passive spectators or actively incurred the expenses of this progress. Okay, so they are not benefited. Who are not benefited? The women, Indians, ordinary whites and blacks. So you can memorize just in simple way. This unit all examine the responses of these marginalized social groups to American consolidation as a nation state. So here it is the introduction, the scenes of an American mission in mid-19th century America. So America of the mid-19th century was a young nation and a nation of the young. Its mainstream inhabitants were ever ready to break any barriers on the self-actualization and self-aggrandizement swept by a romantic feeling that their country had a transcendent national destiny. Okay, so America of the mid-19th century was a young nation and a nation of the young. Okay, so here it is a young nation and the nation of the young. Its mainstream inhabitants were ever ready to break any barriers on their self-actualization and self-aggrandizement. Okay, so mainstream inhabitants, who were they? Were ever ready to break any barriers on their self-actualization and self-aggrandizement, swept by a romantic feeling that their country had a transcendent national destiny. America's first great historian, George Bancroft, rejoiced that his nation would allure the world to freedom by the beauty of its example. So, okay, America's first great historian. Who was America's first great historian? You can remember in your NET exam it will come. That is George Bancroft. Okay, so America's first great historian, George Bancroft. Okay, here it is the main point. America's first great historian, George Bancroft. Okay, then rejoiced that his nation would allure the world to freedom by the beauty of its example. Okay, so rejoiced the nation. Who rejoiced the nation? America. Okay, allure the world to freedom by the beauty of its example. How could America help but exhort, asked Charles Hodai, a greater influence on the human family than any other nation that has yet existed? So how could America help but exert, asked Charles Hodai, a greater influence on the human family than any other nation that has yet existed? God himself, people said, had America under his special care. Had he not ensured a victory for the country in the war of independence against Britain? Had he not granted it a miraculous second chance to fulfill its destiny as a New Jerusalem? Clearly, Americans said, God had a great work in the world for them to perform. In my previous videos already I have discussed what was Puritan utopia. You can go through this video and you will get all the details notification how American people treat them or tell them that they were God's son. Okay, God had a great work in the world for them to perform. So side by side, here it is a positivity in Americans people or American natives. Okay, you can see what trend or what type of positivity they have in their mindset. So side by side with this arrogance plus confidence for all this their future as a nation, there was another mood as well, one not so often revealed to foreign visitors. So side by side this type of attitude constructs a arrogance plus confidence. Okay, here it is a arrogance plus confidence. So there was another mood as well, one not so often revealed to foreign visitors. Okay, mood as well, one not so often revealed to foreign visitors. America's boasting national prosperity filled many people with gloomy foreboding. In 1842, Reverend Caleb Station warned. Okay, so here it is a foreign visitors. They are not so often revealed to foreign visitors. America's boasting national prosperity filled many people with gloomy foreboding. In 1842, Reverend Caleb Station warned The basis of our civilization is wealth. Okay, in 1842, Reverend Caleb Stetson warned, the basis of our civilization is wealth. The love of money is almost the universal passion. The inordinate pursuit of it for the gratification of avarice, vanity, pride, and ambition has deeply corrupted the principles of the country and nearly destroyed all generous public feeling. So, who told this? Here in 1842, Reverend Caleb Stetson warned. Okay. So, here you can remember in 1842, Reverend Caleb Stetson warned. Okay. Warned. The basis of our civilization is wealth. The love of money is almost the universal passion. The inordinate pursuit of it for the gratification of avarice, vanity, pride, and ambition has deeply corrupted the principles of the country and nearly destroyed all generous public feeling. Okay, the inordinate pursuit of it for the gratification of avarice, vanity, pride, and ambition has deeply corrupted the principles of the country and nearly destroyed all generous public feeling. Okay. The inordinate pursuit it for the gratification of avarice, vanity, pride, and ambition has deeply corrupted the principles of the country and nearly destroyed all the generous public feeling. Prosperity, such critics said, had in some way turned a republican dream into a nightmarish jungle of unprincipled dollar chasers. Okay, so prosperity, such critics said, had in some way turned a republican dream into a nightmarish jungle of unprincipled dollar chasers. So, American idealists knew that they had to prove before European skeptics that democracy was a workable, indeed better form of government than aristocracy. Okay, so American details knew that they had to prove before European skeptics that democracy was a workable, indeed better form of government than aristocracy. So, American people were in aristocracy, whereas European people in skeptics or prefer democracy. So, American idealists knew that they had to prove before European skeptics that democracy was a workable, indeed better form of government than aristocracy. Okay. So, the young Massachusetts politician Daniel Webster, using idiom familiar to contemporaries, said in the mid 1820s that this lovely land, these benign institutions, the dear purchase of your fathers, constituted a sacred trust for all generations. The young Massachusetts politician Daniel Webster, using idiom familiar to contemporaries, said in the mid 1820s that this lovely land, these benign institutions, the dear purchase of our fathers, constituted a sacred trust for all generations. So, who told this? The Massachusetts politician Daniel Webster told this. Here it is, you can see the patriotism mood of American people. The Massachusetts politician Daniel Webster, using the idiom familiar to contemporaries. Okay. Then, nevertheless, the promise of democracy clearly eluded the issue of the rights of certain social groups, for example, women, Indians, ordinary whites, and blacks. Women, for instance, were stereotyped into the role of glorious motherhood and thereby eschewed from any decision making agency in the world outside the home. The woman's job was to keep the home neat and tidy and cheerful and a haven of security and stability away from the stresses of the world outside. In 1819, one pious wife wrote, "The air of the world is poisonous." Okay, one pious wife wrote, "The air of the world is poisonous. You must carry an antidote with you or the infection will prove fatal." So, in 1819, one pious wife wrote, "The air of the world is poisonous." In 1819, one pious wife wrote, "The air of the world is poisonous. You must carry an antidote with you or the infection will prove fatal." 1809, one pious wife wrote, "The air of the world is poisonous. You must carry an antidote." with you or the infection will prove fatal. In order that women make the antidote effective, the Young Ladies Book of 1830 advised that in whatever situation of a life of woman is placed from her cradle to her grave, a spirit of obedience and submission, pliability of temper and humility of mind are required from her. So as a woman they can't express their expression. Okay, so they should be very submissive in nature. So at that time the American society states it. So in whatever situation a life of woman is placed from her cradle to her grave, a spirit of obedience and submission, pliability of temper and humility of mind are required from her. Okay, here it is a humility of mind are required from her. And one woman wrote in 1850 in the book Greenwood Leaves. Okay, in 1850 in the book Greenwood Leaves, true feminine genius is ever timid, doubtful and clingingly dependent, a perpetual childhood. And one woman wrote in 1850 in the book Greenwood Leaves, true feminine genius is ever timid, doubtful and clingingly dependent, a perpetual childhood. True feminine genius is ever timid, doubtful and clingingly dependent, a perpetual childhood. Okay, so true feminine genius is ever timid, doubtful and clingingly dependent, a perpetual childhood. True feminine genius is ever timid, doubtful and clingingly dependent, a perpetual childhood. So it is Greenwood Leaves told that. So Greenwood Leaves in 1850 told that true feminine genius is ever timid, doubtful and clingingly dependent, a perpetual childhood. Another book, Recollections of a Southern Matron, recorded thus: if any habit of his annoyed me, means the husband, if any habit of his annoyed me, I spoke of it once or twice calmly, then bore it quietly. Giving women rules for conjugal and domestic happiness, one book ended with, do not expect too much. I spoke of it once or twice calmly, then bore it quietly. Okay, I spoke of it once or twice calmly, then bore it quietly. Giving women rules for conjugal domestic happiness, one book ended with, do not expect too much. Okay, so here it is the main key point you can note down at that time. So woman writer was there and the writings domestic happiness and the book ended with, do not expect too much from the society or from the husband. The cult of domesticity for the woman was a way of winning her over with a doctrine of separate but equal, giving her work of equal but separate importance to that of man. The cult of domesticity for the woman was a way of winning her over with a doctrine of separate but equal, giving her work of equal but separate importance to that of man. Okay, separate but equal, giving her work of equal but separate importance to that of man. Within that equality, there was the fact that woman's labor as housewife was entirely unpaid for. She could not own property and had no right to vote. The cult of domesticity for the woman was a way of winning her over with a doctrine of separate but equal, giving her work of equal but separate importance to that of man. Within that equality, there was the fact that woman's labor as housewife was entirely unpaid for. She could not own property and had no right to vote. So at that time, women were not considered equal as men. Okay, the equality, there is the fact, and the housewife was entirely unpaid for. She could not own property and had no right to vote. So marriage enchanged and motherhood doubled the chains. Okay, marriage enchanged and motherhood doubled the chains. One girl wrote in 1791, the die is about to be cast which will probably determine the future happiness or misery of my life. I have always anticipated the event with a degree of solemnity almost equal to that which will terminate my present existence. So, here it is a girl written quotes. I have always anticipated the event with a degree of solemnity almost equal to that which will terminate my present existence. So, the girl was in fear. Okay. So, just a minute. So, marriage engined and motherhood doubled the chains. One woman writing in 1813 wailed, "The idea of soon giving birth to my third child and the consequent duties I shall be called to discharge distress me, so I feel as if I should sink." This despondency was lightened by the thought that something important was given to the woman to do to maintain the purity of the household and to hold it up as an emblem of ethical living. So, here in these two paragraphs, we have concluded that one girl wrote in 1791, that is marriage enchained and motherhood doubled the chains. So, women at that time, they only maintained the purity of the household and to hold it up as an emblem of ethical living. So, they were mainly the happy homemakers. Okay. Then the Indian response to the American mission. If women of all the marginalized groups in a society dominated by white males of an affluent background were closest to home, indeed in the home the most interior, then the Indians were the most exterior, the most distant from home. Thus, while women were dealt with by pulverization, okay. So, women were dealt with by pulverization. Pulverization means their men are not inside the home, they are exterior, okay. And so, the policy of Indian removal, as it has been euphemistically called, cleared the land for white occupancy between the Appalachians and the Mississippi, cleared it for cotton in the south and for grain in the north, for immigration and the building of a huge continental empire. Okay. So, you can remember, so two food products, that is cotton in south and for grain in north, like your Appalachians and Mississippi cleared it for cotton in south and for grain in north, for immigration and the building of a huge continental empire. So, statistics tell the story of the devastating implications of the Indian removal policy. Michael Rogin's Fathers and Children document some facts and figures. In 1790, there were 39 lakh Americans and most of them lived within 50 miles of the Atlantic Ocean. In 1830, there were 13 million Americans and most of them had crossed the Appalachian Mountains into the Mississippi Valley, that huge expanse of land crisscrossed by rivers flowing into the Mississippi from east and west. In 1820, 120,000 Indians lived east of the Mississippi. In 1840, fewer than 30,000 were left. Most of them had been forced to migrate westward. Okay. So, Indians were forced to migrate westward. This is a statistical data you can see. Okay. In 1840, fewer than 30,000 were left. Most of them had been forced to migrate westward. So, here the picture of Tekmis. Okay. Here is the picture of Tesumek. So, you can see. Then Indian removal was necessary for the opening of the vast American lands to agriculture, to industry, to markets, to money, to the development of the modern capitalist economy. Land was indispensable for all this, and after the War of Independence, huge sections of land were brought up by rich speculators including George Washington and Patrick Henry. In North Carolina, rich tracts of land belonging to the Chickasaw Indians were put on sale. Although the Chickasaws were among the few Indian tribes fighting for the American against the British, and a treaty had been signed with them guaranteeing their land, John Dolson, a state surveyor, ended up with 20,000 acres of land near what is now Chattanooga. Okay, near what is now Chattanooga. Okay, so John Dolson, a state surveyor, ended up with 20,000 acres of land near what is now Chattanooga. His son-in-law was equally successful in his land deals. This was Andrew Jackson, a future president of the United States. So you can remember the key points. The Andrew Jackson, a future president at that time of United States. You can remember Andrew Jackson, a future president of the United States. The Indian response to the white invasion epitomized one of the most important themes of the literary expression of the Indian peoples of North America since the early years of colonization. By the start of the 19th century, there were some excellent examples of Indian protest statements, always of course in the oral mode. A statement made in 1809 by Tecumseh, a Sioux chief, exhorting the different tribes of Indians to unite against the common enemy, remains the most important articulation of this genre. So here it is the main key point. You can note down a statement made in 1809 by Tecumseh, a Shawnee chief, exhorting the different tribes of Indians to unite against the common enemy, remains the most important articulation of the genre. The way and the only way to check and to stop this evil is for all the red men to unite in claiming a common and equal right in the land as it was at first and should be yet, for it was never divided but belongs to all for the use of each, that no part has a right to sell even to each other, much less to strangers, those who want all and will not do with less. Angered when fellow Indians were induced to cede a great tract of land to the United States government, Tecumseh organized in 1811 an Indian gathering of 5,000 on the bank of Tallapoosa River in Alabama and told them, "Let the white race perish. They seize your land, they corrupt your women, they trample on the ashes of your dead. Back whence they came upon a trail of blood, they must be driven." So here you can see the picture of Andrew Jackson, the president from 1828 to 1835, polarized American politics and inaugurated the second party system. Okay. From 1814 to 1824, in a series of treaties with the different tribes of Indians, whites took over 3/4 of Alabama and Florida, 1/3 of Tennessee, 1/5 of Georgia and Mississippi, and parts of Kentucky and North Carolina. Andrew Jackson played a key role in those treaties, and according to Michael Rosin, his friends and relatives received many of the patronage appointments as Indian agents, traders, treaty commissioners, surveyors, and land agents. Okay. So a treaty was signed by Andrew Jackson, and due to this, the friends relatives received many of the patronage appointments as Indian agents, traders, treaty commissioners, surveyors, and land agents. Jackson himself described how the treaties were obtained. "We addressed ourselves feelingly to the predominant and governing passion of all Indian tribes, that is their avarice or fear. He encouraged white squatters to move into Indian settlements, then told the Indians the government could not remove the whites and so they had better cede the lands or be wiped out. He also Rosin writes practiced extensive bribery. Okay, so he also Rosin's writes practiced extensive bribery. He encouraged white squatters to move into Indian settlements, then told the Indians the government could not remove the whites and so they had better code the lands or be wiped out. Under Jackson, who became President of the United States in 1828, and the man he chose to succeed him, Martin Van Buren, 70,000 Indians east of the Mississippi were forced westward. In the north, there weren't that many, and the Iroquois Confederation southward of the New York State. However, the Sac and the Fox Indians of Illinois were removed after the Black Hawk War, when Chief Hawk was taken captive after defeat in 1832. He made a surrender speech. So here it is the main key point you can note down. Chief Hawk was Chief Hawk was taken captive after defeat in 1832 and he made a surrender speech. So who made a surrender speech? You can write that is Chief Hawk was taken captive after defeat in 1832 and he made a surrender speech. I fought hard, but your guns were well aimed. The bullets flew like birds in the air and whizzed by our ears like the wind through the trees in the winter. My warriors fell around me. The sun rose dim on us in the morning. Under the night it sunk in a dark cloud and looked like a ball of fire. That was the last sun that shone on Black Hawk. He is now a prisoner to the white men. He has done nothing for which an Indian ought to be ashamed. He has fought for his countrymen, the squaws and papooses, against white men who came year after year to cheat them and take away their lands. You know the cause of our making war. It is known to all white men. They ought to be ashamed of it. Indians are not deceitful. The white men speak bad of the Indian and look at him spitefully. Okay, so here it is the main key point you can note down. The white men speak bad of the Indian and look at him spitefully. But the Indian doesn't tell lies. Indians do not steal. An Indian who is as bad as the white men could not live in our nation. He would be put to death and eaten up by the wolves. The white men are bad schoolmasters. They carry false books and deal in false actions. They smile in the face of the poor Indian to cheat them. They shake them by the hand to gain their confidence, to make them drunk, to deceive them and ruin their lives. We told them to leave us alone and keep away from us. They followed on the beset our paths and they coiled themselves among us like the snake. They poisoned us by their touch. We were not safe. We lived in danger. We were becoming like them. Hypocrites and liars, adulterers, lazy drones, all talkers and no workers. The white men do not scalp the head, but they do worse. They poison the heart. Farewell, my nation. Farewell to Black Hawk. Protest statements apart, North American Indian literary expression from the pre-Civil War period may be classified under at least two heads: collective myths, tales and songs transcribed by ethnologists, and personalized narratives by individual leader figures of one tribe or another. Although serious study of American Indian literature has taken place primarily since the beginning of the 20th century, as early as the early 19th century, scholars often recognize the vital significance of the oral tradition of the American Indians. No doubt the most tall claim in this respect was made by Walter Canning, who, writing in the North American Review in 1815, called upon the American Indian tradition as one means of establishing a national literature for America. Remarking upon the fact that there was as of then no American national literature insofar as there was as of then no American national culture distinguishable from British culture, Channing argued that the oral tradition of America's aborigines could be said to constitute the native literary expression of North America. Channing's assessment emphasizes those features of the American Indian tradition that modern scholars have continued to recognize as central to tradition. Although it is very difficult to generalize about a tradition incorporating hundreds of diverse dialects and languages, there is a pervasive inclination in American Indian literature towards a consonance between artistic structure and organic process. Native American literature received its inspiration from the rhythms of nature, the cycle of the seasons, and of the human body. It often employs reiteration and repetition to create an organic compact with the surrounding oral and visual world. Frequently commonplace characters and incidents are infused with larger than life mystic elements. Harmonious wholeness with the universe is the subject of much ceremonial material whose rhythms function to restore schemes made by human being between self and the community and the nature. Then the working class, white response to the American mission. What did progress signify for the American whites? To be sure, for the white Americans in general, the period under review was a better period than ever before in American history. But for the working class white Americans in particular, it was a time of trials and tribulations nonetheless. The full extent of working class consciousness of those years as of any years is lost in history, writes Howard Zinn, but fragments remain and make us wonder how much of this always existed under the practical silence of working people. So here you can make a key point, that is Howard Zinn. Okay, so here it is Howard Zinn, but fragments remain and make us wonder how much of this always existed under the practical silence of working people. In 1827, an address before the mechanics and working classes of Philadelphia was recorded, written by an unlettered mechanic, probably a young shoemaker, who said, we find ourselves oppressed on every hand. We labor hard in producing all comforts of life for the enjoyment of others, while we ourselves obtain by a scanty portion, and even that in the present state of society depends on the will of employers. Francis Wright of Scotland, an early utopian socialist. Okay, so who was an early utopian socialist? You can say Francis Wright of Scotland. Okay, here the Francis Wright of Scotland, an early utopian socialist, you can note down, was invited by Philadelphia working men to speak on the 4th of July 1829 to one of the first city-wide association of labor unions in the United States. She asked if the war of independence had been fought to crush down the sons and daughters of your country's industry under neglect, poverty, vice, starvation, and disease. She wondered if the new technology was not lowering the dignity of human labor, making people into appendages of machines, crippling the minds and bodies of child laborers. Okay, she wondered if the new technology was not lowering the dignity of human labor, making people into appendages of machines, crippling the minds and bodies of child laborers. Later that year, George Henry Evans, an editor of the Working Man's Advocate, wrote the Working Men's Declaration of Independence. Among the list of facts submitted to candid and impartial fellow citizens, the laws of levying taxes are operating most oppressively on one class of society. The laws of private incorporation are all partial, favoring one class of society at the expense of another. The laws have deprived 9/10 of members of the body politic, who were not wealthy of the equal means to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The lien law in favor of the landlords against tenants is an illusion among innumerable others. Okay, the laws have deprived 9/10 of the members of the body politic who are not wealthy of the equal means to enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The lien law in favor of the landlords against tenants is one illustration among innumerable others. Evans believed that all on arriving at adult age are entitled to equal property. A trades union meeting in Boston 1834 including both men and women workers from various trades and from various regions of the country referred to the Declaration of Independence. We hold that laws which have a tendency to raise any peculiar class above their fellow citizens by granting special privileges are contrary to and in defiance of chosen primary principles. So, our public system of education which so liberally endows those seminaries of learning which are only accessible to the wealthy, while our common schools are so illy provided for, thus even in childhood the poor are apt to think themselves inferior. During those years, as Philip Foner has assiduously shown in his book History of the Labor Movement in the US trade unions were in their formative stages. Okay, here you can note down the point, that is the labor movement in US trade unions were in their formative stages. Okay, those years Philip Foner has assiduously shown in his book History of the Labor Movement. Okay, so here Philip Foner in his book History of the Labor Movement. The courts called them conspiracies to resist trade and therefore illegal, as when in New York 25 members of the Union Society of Journeymen tailors were found guilty of conspiracy to injure trade, riot, assault, battery. The judge levying fines said, "In this favored land of law and liberty, the road to advancement is open to all. Every American knows or ought to know that he has no better friend than the laws and that he needs no artificial combination for his protection." Okay, every American knows or ought to know that he has no better friend than the laws and that he needs no artificial combination for his protection. They are of foreign origin and I am led to believe mainly upheld by foreigners. A handbill was then circulated throughout the city, "The rich against the poor. George Edwards, the tool of the aristocracy against the people, mechanics and working men, a deadly blow has been struck at your liberty. They have established the precedent that working men have no right to regulate the price of labor. In other words, the rich are the only judges of the wants of the poor man." The rich against the poor, George Edwards, the tool of the aristocracy against the people, mechanics and working men, a deadly blow has been struck at your liberty. They have established the precedent that working men have no right to regulate the price of labor. Or in other words, the rich and the only judges of the wants of the poor man. At City Hall Park, 27,000 people gathered to denounce the court decision. 3 months later, a convention of working class people and farmers. The convention met in Utica, drew up a declaration of independence from existing political parties and established an equal rights party. Although they ran their own candidates for office, there was no great confidence in the ballot as a means of effecting change. One of the great ideologues of the movement, Seth Luther, told a 4th of July rally, "We will try the ballot box first. If that will not effect our righteous purpose, the next and last resort is the cartridge box." Such are the little known instances of working class white literature produced during the era of progress in America. Such are the little known instances of working class white literature produced during the era of progress in America. The black response to the American mission. Paradoxically, the literature produced by the black slaves voicing the black response to American progress, is better known that working class white literature, despite the fact that black self had fewer rights, even no right at all, as compared to working class whites. Okay, paradoxically, the literature produced by the black slaves voicing the black response to American progress are better known than working class white literature, despite the fact that the black slave had fewer rights, even no rights at all, as compared to working class whites. So white people, whatever they wrote, they were considered, the writings of the white peoples were considered as legitimate. Okay. The initial impetus towards literary expression by black slaves came from free blacks in the North, who numbered about 130,000 in 1830 and about 200,000 in 1850, agitated for the abolition of slavery, even as black slaves in the South struggled to cope with the peculiar institution. In 1829, David Walker, son of a slave but born free in North Carolina, moved to Boston, where he sold old clothes. Okay, so 1829, David Walker, son of a slave but born free in North Carolina, moved to Boston, where he sold old clothes. David Walker, son of slave but born free in North Carolina, moved to Boston, where he sold old clothes. The pamphlet he wrote and printed, Walker's Appeal, became widely known. The pamphlet he wrote and printed, Walker's Appeal, became widely known. It infuriated slaveholders. Okay, it infuriated slaveholders. Georgia offered a reward of $10,000 to anyone who would deliver Walker alive and $1,000 to anyone who would kill him. Such was the insidious influence of his appeal. Okay, so what was Walker's Appeal? So Walker's Appeal became widely known. It infuriated slaveholders. Okay, it infuriated slaveholders. Georgia offered a reward of $10,000 to anyone who would deliver Walker alive and $1,000 to anyone who would kill him. Such was the insidious influence of his appeal. So you can remember the Walker's Appeal. Okay, here it is the main key point, Walker's Appeal. Then there was no slavery in history, even that of the Israelites in Egypt, worse than the slavery of the Africans in America, Walker opined. Show me a page of history, either sacred or profane, or which verse can be found which maintains that the Egyptians heaped the insupportable insult upon the children of Israel by telling them that they were not of the human family. Okay, so they show me the page of history, either sacred or profane, or which verse can be found which maintains that the Egyptians heaped the insupportable insult upon the children of Israel by telling them that they were not of the human family. Okay, so Walker was sharing about his fellow blacks who would want to be like white folks. I would wish candidly to be understood what I would not give a pinch of snuff to be married to any white person I ever saw in all the days of my life. So Walker was sharing about the fellow blacks and who would want to be like white folks, and he told that he would not give a pinch of snuff to be married to any white person. So the black person or black people had no rights to marry a white person at that time. Blacks must fight for their freedom, he said. Let our enemies go on with their butcheries and at once fill up their cup. Never make an attempt to gain our freedom or natural right from under our cruel oppressors and murderers until you see your way clear. When that hour arrives and you move, be not afraid or dismayed. God has been pleased to give us 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 feet, and some sense in our hands as well as they. They have no more right to hold us in slavery than we have to hold them. As sufferings will come to an end in spite of all the Americans this side of eternity, then we will want all the learning and talents among ourselves, and perhaps more the govern ourselves. Every dog must have its day. The Americans is coming to an end. Okay, so here it is the main key point. Then the black people realize themselves God has been pleased to give us 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 feet, some sense and hands as well. Then they will want all the learning and talents among ourselves, and perhaps more to govern ourselves. Every duck must have its day. That's the American is coming to an end. One summer day in 1830, David Walker was found dead near the doorway of his shop in Boston. However, even blacks under slavery exhibited a rare spirit of resistance. Lawrence Levin, in his book Black Culture and Black Consciousness, gives a picture of rich culture among enslaved blacks, a complex mixture of repetition and adaptation. Through the creativity of songs and stories, narratives often had double meanings. The line, "O Canaan, sweet Canaan, I am bound for the land of Canaan," often meant that slaves dreamed of moving from south to north, from slavery to freedom. During the Civil War, slaves began to make up new narratives with bolder messages. "Before I would be a slave, I would be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be saved." Levin describes resistance of this kind as pre-political, expressed in countless modes of everyday existence. Religion, magic, music, art were all ways, according to him, for slaves to resist their dehumanization. Some born in slavery acted out the unfulfilled desire of millions. Frederick Douglass. Okay. So religion, music, magic, art were always, according to him, for slaves to resist their dehumanization. Some born in slavery acted out the unfulfilled desire of millions. Frederick Douglass, a slave sent to Baltimore to work as a servant and as a laborer in the shipyard, somehow learned to read and write, and at 21 in the year 1838 escaped from slavery. Okay, so here is the incident. You can see some born in slavery acted out the unfulfilled desire of millions. Frederick Douglass, a slave sent to Baltimore to work as a servant, as a laborer in the shipyard. So he learned to read and write, and at 21 in the year 1838 escaped from slavery and became the most famous black man of his time as lecturer, journalist, author. In his autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, he recalled his first childhood thoughts about his condition. Okay, so here it is the main key point you can note down. American Slave's autobiography, that is Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. He recalled his childhood thoughts about his condition. Why am I a slave? Why are some people slaves and others masters? Was there ever time when this was not so? How did the relation commence? Once, however, engaged in the inquiry, I was not very long in finding out the true solution of the matter. It was not color, but crime, not God, but man, that afforded the true explanation of the existence of slavery. Nor was I long in finding out another important truth. For all, what man can make, man can unmake. Okay. So I distinctly remember being even then most strongly impressed with the idea of being a free man someday. The Fugitive Slave Act passed in 1850 by the federal government made it easy for the slave owners to recapture ex-slaves or simply to pick up blacks they claimed had run away. Okay, so the Fugitive Slave Act passed in 1850 by the federal government. Okay, so when the Fugitive Slave Act passed, so you can say the answer, the Fugitive Slave Act passed in 1850 by the federal government made it easy for the slave owners to recapture ex-slaves or simply to pick up blacks they claimed had run away. Free blacks protested the Fugitive Slave Act, denouncing President Fillmore, who signed it, and Senator Daniel Webster, who supported it. One of these was J.W. Logan, son of black slave and her white owner. He had escaped to freedom on his master's horse, gone to college, and was now a minister in Syracuse, New York. He spoke to a meeting in that city in 1850. The time was come to change the tones of submission into tones of defiance and to tell Mr. Fillmore and Mr. Webster, if they propose to execute this measure upon us, to send on their bloodhounds. I received my freedom from heaven, and with it came the command to defend my title to it. I don't respect this law, I don't fear it, I won't obey it. It outlaws me, and I outlaw it. Logan made his home in Syracuse a point of departure for runaway slaves leaving for Canada. His reminiscence on his own years as a slave chattel came to the attention of his former mistress, and she wrote to him asking him either to return or to send her $1,000 in compensation. Logan's reply to her was printed in the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator. Okay, so here it is the main key point, the Liberator newspaper. So you can note down the Liberator. Mrs. Sarah Locke, you say you have offers to buy me and that you shall sell me if I do not send you $1,000, and in the same breath and almost in the same sentence you say, you know we raised you as we did our own children. Woman, did you raise your own children for the market? Did you raise them for the whipping post? Did you raise them to be driven up, bound to a coffin in chains? Shame on you. If you or any other speculator on my body and rights wish to know how I regard my rights, they need but come here and lay their hands on me to enslave me. Yours, etc., J.W. Logan. Frederick Douglass knew that the shame of slavery was not just that of the slave traders and slave owners, but of the whole nation. On the 4th of July 1852, he gave an Independence Day address. Fellow citizens, pardon me and allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar, and to confess the benefits and to express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? What to American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. Then let us sum up. In this unit, we have examined some of the oral and written responses of some of the major minority groups within the emerging United States nation state for all women. Indians, working class, whites and blacks, to the process of national consolidation of the erstwhile colonies of Britain in America. These responses epitomize the till recently ignored and unacknowledged literary expression of these minority groups, underlying the sublime utterances of voices from the white majority, including those of the transcendentalists. Okay, so in this unit you can symbolize just one thing: the white men were more privileged than black men. Okay, so here it is the main key points, that is the sublime utterances of voices from the white majority, including those of the transcendentalists. Okay, here is the question. You can see, comment on the marginalization of women as a social group within the process of national consolidation of the United States of America in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. So you can write the answer. The women were happy homemakers and they only take care their children and the home, and the home should be a heavenly home. What are the most important themes of American Indian literary expression during the period under review in this unit? What are the most important themes of American Indian literary expression? You can justify your answer with the American Indian literary expression with more poets and literary views. To what extent does working class literary expression during the period under review in this unit represent the true condition of working class whites of America in their days? What were the most important themes of Black American literary expression during the period under review in this unit? So you can justify your answer. Okay. So here is the suggested reading. The Democracy in America, then Eleanor Flexner, A Century of Struggle, Eugene Genovese, Roll Jordan. Okay, here is the suggested readings. Then we will go Unit 4, American Prose around the Civil War. Okay, so here it is the all about the national consolidation. So you can go through this video and the previous video already which I have put in my channel. So keep like, share and subscribe to this channel and push the bell icon to get the earliest notification. So thank you viewers.